Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's Tuesday, the 18th of February, 2025. I know everybody's very, very worried about Social Security, very, very worried about what happened at the IRS this weekend. We have a lot to talk about. I hope you all at least had something of a peaceful 3-day weekend, but I know that with this chaos, it's really hard. So we're going to get into all of that and a lot more today because there is a really interesting really damning legal development actually happening right now in the context of Elon Musk's role in the entire federal government. So we're going to get into that too. Okay, first things first. Today for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing a blue button-down blouse. My hair is pulled back. I have a pair of very, very small gold hoops in today. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart and the big cushy chair behind me. And I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied, unceded Munsee, Lenape, and Mohican land. Gratitude to the caretakers of the land on which I live and work. Okay, so over the weekend, we had two very major developments. The first was that Musk and his Nazi Youth Brigade, as we have come to call them, got into the IRS. And as if that wasn't bad enough, we now know that they have access to individual taxpayer data, which, by the way, is profoundly dangerous. I just want to make this very clear for everyone. They have apparently now the ability to overwrite tax data, the ability to see Social Security numbers and banking information, and the ability to track individual taxpayers. So I know we're very worried about Social Security, and legitimately so, but I also just want to make one other point here, which is incredibly important. What this means is that they have the ability to wipe clean the slate of any of their super rich friends who owe back tax debt rather, and they have the ability to go into bank accounts where there has been debit access granted for average everyday Americans. So all of this is very disturbing. And again, I have to remind you all, there is going to be litigation related to these two particular issues of the IRS and Social Security. Again, as we talked about last week, they are working very hard on the weekends on purpose. They are doing their best, in fact, to do the work when courts are closed, and to try to find ways of doing this like kind of under the cover of darkness, okay? The weekends are when all this stuff is breaking, and that is intentional. I have no doubt about it. But the second thing that happened yesterday was that we learned that they had gone into the Social Security Administration, which of course has an enormous amount of private data on every person who has a Social Security number, including banking information and the ability to access Social Security payments. Now, we had a development yesterday that was not promising, but that mirrors what's happening with Eric Adams and hit that entire corruption scandal in New York City, which is that the acting head of the Social Security Administration, who is a Trump appointee, again, just like these folks in the DOJ in the Southern District of New York, quit because demands were made that she allow the DOGE team access to individual Social Security payer information. Now, there were a lot of questions this morning on the Patreon feed, and I'm going to remind you all that if you want to ask me questions, you can become a paid subscriber over at Patreon for as little as $5 a month. That's less than 20 cents a broadcast. And you can ask questions for 3 hours before the broadcast, and I will answer them in writing or on the air. A lot of questions this morning over on the Patreon feed about why this administrator quit. And a lot of judgment, I'm just going to be really candid about it, about the resignation. So I need to make something really clear to everybody here, because the people who are resigning are being put in an extremely difficult position. They are essentially being told that they have a choice between committing illegal activity or being fired. Okay? Illegal activity or being fired. And I'm going to remind you all that one of the dangers of termination for cause, if they manage to get away with that, is the loss of things like pension benefits, health insurance, right? Things that people have maybe been working on for like the last 35 years, like this Social Security head who was appointed by Trump. She's a lifer inside the Social Security Administration. She started out as a bilingual translator for people seeking help with their Social Security benefits. So I have to tell you all that, like, while I am in favor of people slowing down and throwing sand in the gears, as you all know, I have a lot of compassion for people who are put in this role. Because I want all of you to think for yourself. If my choice was between committing a crime or being fired and losing all of my retirement benefits, wouldn't the legitimate choice for the sake of my professional roles, my future, be to resign? Right? I mean, I have to tell you all that, like, this is not what is being done here is strong arm mafioso style tactics against government officials. And these are people who have dedicated their lives to making sure that the federal government runs as it should. Okay. I hear you on the desire to have people stay put, but I got to tell you, you're asking for an enormous amount of personal sacrifice by people who have like literally been underpaid. Because I'm going to tell you, these government jobs do not pay a mountain of money, who have been underpaid for like a very long time. Okay. I have a lot of compassion for the positions they're being put in, and it's not kind and it's not easy. This particular woman attempted to stop them for as long as she could from gaining access to this confidential data until she basically had no choice but to quit. So I want everyone to be very thoughtful about the way that you are talking about lifetime employees of the federal government who literally are standing up to try to do the right thing under penalty of everything that they have worked for, in some instances for decades, and their future employability, right? This is not their fault, okay? It's not their fault. And, you know, frankly, I think one of the things that's going to have to be accounted for here in the courts is the manner in which these folks are being terminated or forced into resignation when they, you know, honestly, the way that it's being done is not consistent with the procedures that are required in the federal government. All right. So as for what's happening inside Social Security, I do want to reassure you all that I have like literally no doubt in my mind that there is going to be a lawsuit filed seeking an emergency TRO with regard to Social Security like today. I would be shocked to see it hit any later than 5 p.m. All right. Everybody is very, very worried about this. And I know we have people in this community who rely on Social Security to survive. Okay. Everyone is aware of the gravity of it. And there's an enormous amount of really good lawyers out there right now trying to do the right thing, right? Filing lawsuits, seeking emergency relief, seeking emergency temporary restraining orders, getting in front of the judges, even when the courts are closed. This happened yesterday in front of Judge Chutkin. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And again, the same is true for IRS data. So just sit tight. Like, it's not like nothing is going to happen. And in fact, with what we know so far, there appears to be a very good basis for immediate relief, all right? Because that requires immediate and irreparable harm, right? We do not want them messing with Social Security benefits. They have no need for individual Social Security payer information to quote unquote cut waste and fraud, right? All of this is nonsense, and it's just going to take getting the right papers in front of the right judge. All right, speaking of which, we have to talk about what's going on in Judge Chutkin's courtroom, because a number of state attorneys general filed an emergency lawsuit late last week to try to stop Elon Musk in his tracks. Okay. There was a hearing about this on Friday. There was another one yesterday, even though the courts were technically closed. And the basis on which they are seeking to stop Elon Musk is something called the Appointments Clause. Okay. We've talked about this a little bit on Progressive Coffee Hour this weekend for those of you who, again, are Patreon subscribers. But let me just fill you in on what it means. The Appointments Clause of the Constitution says that you are not essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but you're not allowed to have a senior role in government that gives you oversight authority without being appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Okay. This is a very straightforward legal argument. In fact, I love it. I have to say that I think this is like an incredibly good use of it. And it's very, very obvious. All right. So what happened in this case was these attorneys general from various states, Michigan, New Mexico, various states that have Democratic governors. Again, I've reminded you all how important the Democratic Governors Association is in what we're facing down right now. They alleged that Elon Musk has unlawfully and in violation of the Constitution taken oversight authority over pretty much the entire federal government without the compliance of the Appointments Clause. He hasn't been appointed officially to anything other than like employee status, and he certainly has not been Senate confirmed. Okay, so the thing I really like about this argument is that in the event that it is successful, Elon Musk is stopped across the board unless and until he is confirmed by the Senate. Okay, and I have more to say about that in a minute. The thing that is happening now, okay, and this is something to really keep your eyes on, because the Trump administration and his DOJ know that they are cooked on this. Like, there's no way around it. Okay. He's exercising oversight over USAID and the IRS and the Social Security Administration and the Department of Education and the energy departments of prong related to like nuclear safety protocols, the FAA, right? He's not elected, as we've been talking about here for like a month now. He is not an elected official. He's also not an appointed official. And our Constitution bars a private citizen from being in this role without Senate confirmation. All right. This is an easy argument. Okay. So what the White House is doing now, because they know they're cooked, is they have now claimed in an affidavit that has been filed with the court that he is not actually in charge of DOGE. Now, I know you may have a moment where you think to yourself, what the is that all about? How can they possibly claim that when literally like Elon's been out there saying we with regard to DOGE, when there's an executive order that refers to Elon Musk as the head of DOGE, right? It makes absolutely no sense. But their claim now is that he's just an advisor to the president. Just an advisor to the president. He's not actually in charge of any pseudo fake agency. He's not actually exercising any authority over all these multiple agencies where he's sent in the Nazi Youth Brigade to willy-nilly fire people, cut off their access to email, destroy the Federal Aviation Administration, download who knows how much private taxpayer data, right? Oh no, he's just a special advisor to the president. Okay. This is an argument that we know Judge Chutkan is not going to allow to fly. Okay. So here's what's happened in that case. On Friday, she was a little concerned about like whether or not emergency relief was absolutely required, because what's required, of course, for emergency relief is immediate irreparable harm in the offing. Okay. And reminder, it's the state attorneys general who have brought this case. It's not the average everyday taxpayer. It's the states. Now they're bringing it on behalf of their citizens, of course, but she said she didn't necessarily see that it was irreparable and she needed more evidence. So she gave them until Monday to narrow their requested TRO, which they did. Then there was a hearing yesterday, and Chutkan was not pleased with the DOJ. She asked the DOJ lawyer to confirm that 10,000 employees had been fired on Friday night, and they could not do that. They didn't have an answer about whether or not that was actually legitimate or true. She asked them for other factual information, which they could not answer. And again, this in and of itself is very troubling, because if your own DOJ doesn't know what DOGE is doing, that would appear to be a sign that something's not quite right in the way that that leadership is operating. All right. The next thing that happened was that she showed deep concern about the appointments clause argument and the fact that Elon is operating in the way that he's operating. So even if there isn't immediate irreparable harm, she's still got a preliminary injunction part of this case to address, which can be addressed in as little as like a week. Okay. The thing about this particular issue is that she said on the record that she thinks the appointment clause argument has merit. And I will remind you, Judge Chutkan was, of course, the judge assigned to the prosecution against Donald Trump related to January 6th. That case was stayed. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. We all remember this. This is how the presidential immunity decision came down. But I will remind you, Judge Chutkan is extremely thorough. She's by the book. She doesn't create situations where she's going to be overturned on appeal. And I will tell you that if she's signaling in court that Elon Musk has an appointments clause problem, that would be something that would perhaps lead to the DOJ saying to Donald Trump, you might want to say that Elon Musk is just your special advisor and not like in charge of all this other stuff. Okay. But the fact of the matter is they're going to have a very hard time making that argument in court, because there's contradictory statements from the administration in an EO and from Elon Musk himself. So this is a case to absolutely keep your eyes on, because it will, if it's effective, stop Elon in his tracks. Now, I know that there are some naysayers here who are going to be like, oh, but the Senate will just appoint him anyway. I'm going to tell you that is not a done deal. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. We've had some developments over the weekend with regard to this proposed budget resolution, that's coming up, or the federal government is going to shut down in early March. And what we've seen is that there are Republicans who are really not on board with the cuts that are being suggested. Okay. No less than Steve Bannon has been out there reminding people that, in his view, I don't know where he gets his data, 25% of the MAGA base is on Medicaid. And we have Congress people and senators who are out there talking about the fact that huge percentages of the districts in the states they represent rely on the benefits that DOGE is out there trying to cut for their very survival. Okay. Even with the GOP being 100% MAGA, there are some lines that people aren't willing to cross. And that's because they know that they will lose their entire base if they agree to what is being suggested. So I don't think that Elon being appointed by the Senate in the event that they try to do that is a done deal. But I'm going to add one other wrench to this. Okay. DOGE, as we've talked about here a lot, is not a legitimate government agency. Government agencies have to be established by congressional legislation. So what is he even being appointed to do, right? In order to get him past the Senate, he has to be nominated to an appointable position. So there are multiple layers here of restrictions that could prevent Elon from retaking power in the event that he is ousted by Judge Chutkan. And yes, there will be appeals, no doubt about it, okay? But the reality of this is that this is the cleanest, easiest route to removing Elon and the Nazi Youth Brigade from government. So I want everybody to really keep an eye on this one. And Judge Chutkan said she was going to issue a ruling on the emergency relief yesterday. That did not come. I'm going to warn you all here. Please, if she denies the emergency TRO, remember that preliminary injunction relief is still on deck. Okay, let me say that again. If she denies the emergency TRO, preliminary injunction relief is still on deck and could come within days. All right. Emergency relief, again, reminder, is immediate irreparable harm. Okay. The fact that she denies an emergency TRO doesn't mean she's denying the whole case. It doesn't mean she's not going to stop it. It just means that she doesn't see quite the irreparable harm necessary with this group of plaintiffs. So don't allow yourselves to be spun out on this in the event that she denies the TRO, because the case will still carry forward. All right. And there's still the possibility of injunctive relief. All right. Speaking of court cases, there is a very big thing that has happened this morning. Well, there's a bunch, but a very big thing that has happened this morning with regard to the Supreme Court. So Hampton Dillinger, who we have talked about before, who was the head of the Office of Special Counsel, not the Special Counsel's office under Jack Smith. This is the part of the DOJ that is responsible for inspectors general, all right, was unlawfully fired by Donald Trump, right? He had a term. He can't be removed by the president. It's illegal. You cannot fire this man, okay? Already we have had a TRO entered on this. A appeals court affirmed the TRO, and the DOJ has now appealed to the Supreme Court, okay, for emergency relief, saying that Donald Trump can fire Hampton Dillinger, notwithstanding the fact there's a whole statute that says he's not allowed to do that, okay? The Supreme Court has taken the case, and briefs are due by I think tomorrow, opposing this, all right? So they're going to rule on this one fairly quickly. This is not a traditional appeal to the Supreme Court. This is an emergency relief petition, and it's going to move very fast. But this is a test, fundamentally, of whether or not Trump is going to be able to get away with straight out breaking the law with regard to the termination of federal employees who have been appointed under statute and that he does not have the right to remove. Okay. So again, I don't want to hear the cynics in the comments today, so I'm not looking at this while I'm talking about this. All right. I just have to say that, reminder, 2 of the 7 or 8, I think it's 8 altogether, 2 of the 8 people who quit the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, one clerked for Scalia, arguably the most conservative justice of our time, now passed on, and the other clerked for Chief Justice Roberts. Okay. There are lines in the sand that eventually will not be crossable. Okay. And I am waiting to see if this is one. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to hold my breath on that one, because I do think there is a possibility that the Supreme Court would say, no, it actually is explicitly written in the law that you cannot terminate inspectors general. No, you may not do this. In which case, that has implications for my friend Kathy Harris, who was the chairperson of the Merit Systems Protection Board, who Trump fired last week, even though she has a Senate-confirmed term that runs until March 1st of 2028. It has implications for the people that he fired from the National Labor Relations Board, again in violation of statute. So there are much bigger picture issues at stake here than just Hampton Dillinger himself. And my hope, no guarantee on this, we are where we are, is that the Supreme Court's going to say, actually, the law says exactly that you cannot do this. Like, there's no negotiating room on this. You're literally not allowed to fire these people. It says that in our federal code. That would be my hope. But again, we'll have to see how this all plays out. All right. And it is Hampton Dillinger himself, for the person asking, it is Hampton Dillinger himself who has filed for a TRO because he wants to do his job. He wants to go back to work. Just like my friend Kathy Harris has filed for a TRO that, pulled Judge Contreras, and we're hoping for a ruling on that today. She wants to go back to work at the Merit Systems Protection Board, which, by the way, is supposed to protect whistleblower claims and people who have been wrongfully terminated from the federal government. She wants to go back to her job. So these are people who are like public servants, who were confirmed by the Senate, who deserve the right to serve the American people. And we'll have to see how this one plays out. All right. So that's another big court development. Okay. We have one more to talk about. Eric Adams. So we've been covering the Eric Adams saga on this broadcast a lot over the last couple of weeks, including with regard to the corrupt deal that was cut last week to dismiss the charges against him in exchange for his cooperation in persecuting undocumented and asylum-seeking migrants in New York City. Many of whom, by the way, I should just mention, were dumped there by DeSantis and the governor of Texas. Okay. One of the other things, though, that happened last week was we saw these mass resignations at the top of the DOJ. And then finally, Emile Beauvais, Deputy Attorney General, former defense attorney for Donald Trump, literally lined up members of the Public Integrity Division at the DOJ and said, you have 1 hour to find somebody who will sign these papers for me or you're all fired. Okay. Speaking of having to choose between your entire professional career and breaking the law, this is a prime example of that. Okay. Because people will be disbarred for doing this. Well, they finally found somebody. And the person that they found was a man on the edge of retirement from the DOJ who said, you know what? I have a bunch of younger colleagues, people with families and young children, people just starting out who work in this division. And I'm going to sacrifice myself for the sake of their jobs. I'm going to talk about integrity. I mean, my goodness. So this fellow signed the papers, but the papers were modified. And what the papers say is that it's only Emile Beauvais who decided that the charges should be dropped. It's only Emile Beauvais who, on the basis of his opinion, thinks that Eric Adams should not be prosecuted any longer. It's only Emile Beauvais that has reached this conclusion. And it's very carefully drafted to exclude any potential criminal liability from anyone else. Now, while it was submitted under the /S/ of this particular gentleman, which is not his affirmed wet signature, Emile Beauvais filed a notice of appearance in this courtroom in the Southern District of New York, and he wet signed the papers himself. Okay. Never underestimate the willingness of people to destroy themselves on the altar of Donald Trump. It's amazing to me. His career is over now, Emile Beauvais. It's just a matter of time till he loses his bar license. All that said, the latest development is that Judge Dale Ho, who is the judge in the Southern District of New York, who is overseeing one of the prosecutions of Eric Adams, has now set a hearing on this dismissal for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Let me just tell you, that courtroom and that courthouse is going to be packed. Because one of the things that he has explicitly said in this order that he's going to talk about, and he wants information on, and he expects the parties to be prepared to present on, is Eric Adams' capitulation on this. So we now have a situation where Judge Dale Ho, who, by the way, is a friend of mine, who reports that he's incredibly kind and very ethical, is going to be looking into whether or not this dismissal is legitimate. And all intents and purposes and all the evidence we have in the public record is that this is simply an incredibly corrupt deal. We know from the resignation letters last week that none of the people in the Southern District of New York who were on this case thought that it should be dismissed. They believed, in fact, that they could get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt, and that the only basis for doing this was to accede to Donald Trump's policy concerns with regard to immigration. It's going to be a fiery hearing tomorrow. Okay. I'm like, and no television cameras in federal court, by the way, but there will be live reporters in the courtroom. You can guarantee it. And I will just remind you all, Inner City Press is, that guy's amazing. He sits in on hearings inside the New York courts all the time. You can follow him on Blue Sky because I'm sure he's going to be doing a blow by blow along with other people. I wouldn't be surprised actually if Katie Fong is there, but we'll see. Okay. So lots of significant developments in the context of all of this. And on top of it, Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, is meeting today with senior officials in the New York City government to determine whether or not she is going to exercise the right to take Eric Adams out of office. Thank you to all the New Yorkers who've been calling. We talked about this on Friday, the importance of picking up the phone and calling the governor's office and demanding that she remove him. What we want right now actually is for her to pull him out and put him on leave for about the next 2 weeks, because there's a cutoff deadline for a special election versus the primaries, which are coming up. And we want primaries because we don't want there to be a situation where Andrew Cuomo, he who was accused of sexual harassment and removed from the governor's office, and that's how Kathy Hochul became the governor in the first place, he has indicated that he wants to run for the mayor of New York City. And we do not want an opportunity for him to be put into that role. Okay. We want an open primary as they are ordinarily held in New York City. And that is coming up in just a few months. All right. So the timing of this is significant and important. And we will see what Kathy Hochul does. There were a lot of people late last week who were like, Kathy Hochul's never going to dismiss him. You're crazy for talking about that. I'm sorry. Public pressure works. And these developments and these resignations have had an enormous impact on her viewpoint. And that was signaled, by the way, on Rachel Maddow last week. And now here we are. So we'll see what happens next. All right. Okay. I have to cross off my list and I have to put my glasses on, you guys, because I can't see anything now anymore. Okay. That. Okay. So the next thing that we have to talk about is what's happening in Europe, because Pete Hegseth gave an absolutely embarrassing speech last week at the Munich International Security Conference. And then we had JD Vance gave an obscene pro-Nazi speech, essentially very anti-democratic, the day after he went to visit Dachau on top of it. And then we had a development where Trump, together with Putin and MBS, he who ordered the execution of Jamal Khashoggi, decided that they were going to meet in Saudi Arabia to hack out Ukraine's surrender, essentially. Now, while they are saying that they're not doing this without Ukraine on the table, they are actually, in fact, trying to essentially blackmail Ukraine into signing over their mineral rights to the United States, which, of course, Zelensky has said will not happen. So right now we have like 3 world powers sitting in Saudi Arabia claiming that they're going to end the war in Ukraine without Zelensky's consent. Okay. I have to point out, this is all for show. Okay. There's literally no way that Zelensky is going to assent to any kind of a deal that he's not formally at the table for, let alone anything that gives Putin land inside of Ukraine. So you have to keep your eyes on this, but I have to say there has been an enormous kerfuffle about this in Europe over the weekend. That's the understatement of the year. We had an emergency meeting called by Emmanuel Macron in Paris to talk about how the allies in NATO who are on board with defending Ukraine are going to stand up to Trump and Putin together. Whole landscape of this has changed, right? We're kind of like shitting on our allies. I hate to put it in those terms, but it's true. And it's disgusting. And, once Putin gets what he wants, he's not going to stop there. And we all know it. So again, we're going to have to see how this all plays out, but it's a very dangerous situation right now in the context of Trump doing Putin's bidding, which we knew was going to happen. Our own Secretary of Defense talking nonsense. Marco Rubio and JD Vance out there talking about how Ukraine should just capitulate on its land and its borders, if not become a total part of Russia. And Trump trying to essentially blackmail, just like he did, I will point out, in the allegations that led up to the first impeachment with Zelensky, in this case, in exchange for mineral rights. So all of this is destabilizing, to say the least. I think that's probably like the word I'm looking for right now. It's really not great. Okay. So last comment I wanted to deal with today was a question on the Patreon feed, which was very insightful. And the question was essentially this. I'm out there doing the work. I'm organizing in my local community. I'm showing up to protest when I feel like I can. I'm doing everything that I can to respond to this. And I am actively seeking ways to throw sand in the gears. However, I've got this internal tape in my head going that says all of this is for nothing. We've already lost. There's no way this is going to make a difference. Okay. So one of the things that I have to point out here is that this is very, 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 very common right now. Okay. One of the things that's very difficult about what we're living through is that it's all happening very fast. Okay. It's happening so fast and in such a flood that it's hard to kind of like emotionally and mentally grasp the totality of the destruction in real time. And that's intentional, right? They want us to be in a place where we are feeling overwhelmed, because it is something that will stop us actually from organizing. All right. So let me just share like a little anecdote about this. Okay. I have somebody who I work with who actually I was on the phone with this morning. I don't even know if she's here, but I'm using you as an example, who works for the Red Cross in Los Angeles. And I spoke to her right after the fires in LA, and she was in a place of like real despair. Just like, I'm going to get out there and keep doing it, but I don't see what the point is, right? I'm going to put on my good face and I'm going to go out and I'm going to help people in my community, but I think all is lost. And I said to her, name, I completely understand where you're at. This is a sign of burnout, right? You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of your family. You need to take care of your community to the extent that you are able. But if you are in a place where you are feeling like there is no point and it's all hopeless, you are burnt out as an activist and you need to take a break. All right. So I talked to her again this morning. She's way better, like way, 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 way better. She's gotten out of LA. She took a break. She's in the desert. She's hanging out with her loved ones and her neighbors. And she looks like a completely different person than she did a month ago. Okay. So I want to just remind you all that part of activism and effective organizing is knowing when you need to take a pause. Okay. And I know there are randos running around on Blue Sky right now who are like, the only thing we have time for right now is fighting back. I'm sorry. Any experienced organizer will tell you that that is a recipe for disaster. Okay. Even in this era, we have to find time for joy. We have to find time for rest. We have to find time for relaxation. We have to find joy for just like a time for just connecting with people who we love. Okay. And if the tape that is running in your head is, this is all hopeless, there's nothing I can do that will make a difference, I'm going to tell you to take a break. Because I can guarantee, by the way, that if you're out there doing the work, you have evidence to the contrary of that, right? I can guarantee you that there are people who you are affecting who are saying thank you, who are making comments about how you have impacted their lives, who are grateful to you for showing up, right? And I'm also just going to say something that I think should be obvious. Just to quote that old famous quote, you save one life, you save the world, right? And we should take that to heart. You change one person's life, you make a difference in that person's life, you never know how that's going to ripple out, okay? Nothing is hopeless. Nothing. Yes, times are very dark. Yes, the things that are happening are really scary, but there is not a chance in hell that this story is over. Not even close, okay? So if that is the tape that is running in your head, and by the way, if you're seeing people on the internet going like, we're effed, it's all over, democracy had a good run, we're never going to have another election again, you should ignore and block those people. I'm not even kidding. Because the reality is that what happens next is unknown to every single one of us. And that means that our actions in the moment can make a huge difference, okay? Please, if you are finding yourself in the place that says, why am I doing all of this anyway? It's hopeless, it's all over. Take a break. Take a break. Take a week off or a month off. Don't watch the news. Read a book. Go for a walk. Hang out with people who love you, right? Go have coffee or cocktails if that's your thing with people who you really care about and have a really solid laugh. Okay. And come back when you're ready. Like, it's okay. There's millions of us out there right now who are doing things in the form of mutual aid and dual power building and helping our communities and building community pods. It's okay. All right. The thing that is the most important right now is that we understand that all of this is by design. They want us shut down and thinking that it's hopeless. They want us believing that the battle has already been lost and the war. Okay. So this is a moment to mind your own internal thought patterns very carefully. Okay. Because if you're falling prey to the doom scrolling and the doom saying, first of all, you should shut that shit out. And second of all, you should pause, like really take a serious pause. I'm not talking like for an hour. I'm talking for like a long weekend or a week or however long it's going to take. And this is something, by the way, experienced organizers who have been doing this for decades will tell you it's mandatory. It's not optional. The only way we survive and get to the finish line of this in a way where we can actually build the future that we want is if we're not dead before we get there. So please take all of this seriously. And, you know, my 2 cents about this also is that don't forget that, you know, your spiritual practices, for lack of a better word, have a role to play in this. Okay. Find when you hear that tape playing in your head, think about confirmation bias. What's the evidence you have that you actually are making a difference? What's the evidence that's out there right now that there's hope? There were protests all over the country yesterday for Not My President's Day, and they were not small. So, you know, I want everybody to be really like thoughtful about this, right? Thoughtful about the way in which we fall prey to things on the internet from anonymous accounts. Thoughtful for where we are emotionally, somatically, in the context of how we're handling all of this, and thoughtful about our own patterns of thought, right? Is this confirmation bias coming at me? Is this a trauma response? Because that will also tell you something about the most effective way to deal with it, all right? So, yeah, that's it for today. This was kind of a longer broadcast, but it felt necessary. All right, my friends, I will be here tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday at regular time. I am just going to remind you all, please, if you like what we're doing here, hit the thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. You can share this far and wide. And if you're watching on the replay, please drop me a comment because it tells the algorithm that you like what we do. And if you want to support this broadcast, please consider becoming a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive. That allows this work to continue and for me to pay my team. Or you can also hit the $sign or the join button here on YouTube, depending on what platform you're watching it through, like your phone, desktop, laptop, whatever. And you can become a paid subscriber to hit the live chat. Lots of ways to do this work. All right. Thank you all so much for helping out in your communities in your own way. Hang in there, people. I know it's scary and I know it's rough, but we're in this together. Okay. Keep your chins up. Okay. All of us are coming together and doing amazing work. Please look for the people who are doing that work and please take the responses to your good work when they come because it matters. All right. Lots of love, everyone. I will see you all here back tomorrow, regular time. And we'll see what happens in court because I got my eyes on that right now. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye.